Hi everyone, it's Andrew with the Alliance for Innovation and Infrastructure, and this month is Energy Month, which means we're talking with industry professionals about the energy resource relevant to their work. Today, I'm happily joined by Suzanne Lita to talk about solar power. To start right off, my first question is, what do you do and what inspired you to work in renewable energy?
Well, really nice to be talking with you today, Andrew. Thanks for including me. I am head of policy and strategy at SunPower. SunPower is one of the nation's leading residential solar battery storage and more recently EV charger and whole home electrification companies. SunPower is actually one of the most long-standing solar companies in the world. We were established in 1985. We're an American company headquartered in the Bay Area. We've done all kinds of things in solar over the course of our history, but the SunPower of today is exclusively focused on serving residential American consumers with the bill savings and resiliency benefits of solar. And then when it's combined with other technologies, even more like battery storage and the others I mentioned earlier. We currently serve over 500,000 Americans nationwide with these benefits of the technology. And we do business in 49 states and the District of Columbia. One day soon we'll do business in North Dakota. That's the one outstanding place we haven't quite tapped yet. So that's a little bit about SunPower. You can check us out on our website. It's sunpower.com. Our team's responsibility is really to help expand access to the technology for consumers through public policy decisions that regulators and legislators make. And we do that at the federal level and at the state level, and then where we can at the local level. And that's everything from core policies like this policy that most people have never heard of called net energy metering that lets a consumer get extra bill credits on their utility bill when they have solar on their home and they send power back to the grid. Things like rate design that can shape whether or not it makes sense for a consumer to go solar in terms of bill savings, incentives, tax policies, even everything like workforce development is a part of our team's remit. So that's what we do nationally for the company and most importantly for our customers and for American consumers. You know, I have been in clean energy for more than 20 years. And when I was in college, I actually studied anthropology and African studies. And the reason why I did is I was really interested in energy extraction and energy politics internationally. And so the thing that I did my senior thesis on in college was about Shell's oil extraction in Nigeria. And it was really interesting because my theory was, is it better to pursue change through legal action or through grassroots organizing and political activism? And I kind of came to the conclusion way back then when I was very young that it required both. And that's really what inspired me to make a difference in terms of changing our energy policy as a country and of course where we can internationally, because I think oftentimes we don't always think about the ramifications of where our energy comes from. You know, you turn on the light and it's there and you go about your daily life, but it really can have dramatic impact on the world, whether it's human rights, you know, from way back when I was in college, or as we all know now with respect to climate change. So that's what motivated me initially. I've been very, very fortunate throughout my career to make a difference, both with nonprofits and of course, more recently with for-profit organizations. But it's always been with that mission in mind for me personally, which is how can I help change the way our world is powered? That's obviously SunPower's mission too. And what can I do to educate more decision makers from all sides of the political spectrum to be a part of the solution?
Oh my gosh. Well, number one, I want to say how admirable it is that you pursued this and you're continuing to do that. You know, we are the only infrastructure think tank in the nation, and moving into this career for myself, it's one of those things where you're right. So many Americans do not think about what's powering their home. We take everything for granted. Maintaining this quality of life is so important, and that's really awesome.
And you know, one thing that I think about a lot is that a lot of Americans are also starting to think about is how do I live a comfortable life? How do I not have to change sort of everything that I do to make a difference with respect to energy security and resiliency, and for many Americans with respect to climate change? And the great thing about residential solar is like, it's actually a super simple, easy thing to do to make a difference in your home. And you can do it and save money at the same time. So it's like a double whammy in terms of its beneficial effect. Interestingly, about 5 million Americans have solar today, but 100 million Americans could save money with solar if they just went solar tomorrow. So there's a huge opportunity, an educational opportunity to help Americans know that no matter where you live, no matter what your income level, you can access this benefit in terms of bill savings. And then on top of it, you can personally make a huge impact with respect to our environment.
Yes, and like you said, killing two birds with one stone. And how do we incentivize Americans to think more deeply about the energy infrastructure of our nation and what's the components of the energy mix? How would you define solar in your own words? And how does this energy resource set itself apart from others?
Well, simply put, solar energy, whether it's on your home or a community solar project or a large utility scale solar farm, it's a way of capturing the power from the sun, turning that power into electricity that can be either connected to the big transmission grid or connected to a home, an individual home. And the great thing about solar, I think there's a couple things. Number one, the price of the technology, like literally of the panel and the inverter, and if it's a home system, the software that connects it, and the trackers, if it's a utility scale system, that combining the combination of the technology has really declined the cost of it over the past 10 to 15 years. It's actually at the utility scale level, it's competitive with traditional fossil fuel power, which is super exciting. And it can also be competitive when it's combined with battery storage. So you can get that consistent power even when the sun goes down. And then with residential systems, it's gone down to the point where, again, as an everyday consumer, you can save money pretty much on day one when you have solar on your home. That's super, super exciting to me because it means that you can get clean, reliable power in this country from this really amazing resource. And it doesn't have any fuel costs, which means that you pay for the system with one upfront cost, but then that cost doesn't change. So it's a great hedge against other types of energy sources, which have fuel costs, which, as we know, have really varied dramatically over history. That's kind of the simplest way that I can explain kind of solar power. I will say that the thing that we need is all kinds of clean technologies. So solar works really well in combination with things like wind energy and geothermal and other forms of renewable energy. But one thing that's unique about solar is that you can put it pretty much anywhere. You don't have to have a particular part of the country, for example, where the wind resource is really high. We definitely need that too. But one thing I really like about solar is that even in shady places, you're still generating power.
What are the challenges, and how does what you do help overcome those challenges?
I'm going to start with the consumer level and then I go on to the large scale level. Even though I work for a residential solar company, I work really closely in partnership with our National Trade Association, the Solar Energy Industries Association, and others. And it's really a float all boats kind of thing. We actually need the technology at all scales to really ensure that we have a resilient energy economy in the United States and around the world. At the residential level, one of the biggest challenges is actually ensuring that we have the right core policies, like this policy called net energy metering, and the right rate design structure, so that if you're a consumer and you put solar on your home, you're getting enough benefit from that so that it saves you money. That does exist in lots of parts of the country today, but it doesn't exist in really good form everywhere. And so our team is actually constantly working with utility regulators to help improve and defend the policies that we have in place that allow for that. And the best one example of that would be where this net energy metering policy that I mentioned. And the key thing that we work on is ensuring that the customer can get fair compensation in the form of a bill credit when they provide extra power back to the grid. We also work on things like rate designs. For example, this policy called time of use rates, where the amount of kilowatt hour that you get charged by the utility as the consumer varies depending on the time of day and the season. That actually can be really good policy depending on how it's structured, because it can encourage a customer to combine a solar system with battery storage and actually save more money if they combine the two versus only choose one, which is typically just solar. So things like that are policies we work on every day to fundamentally ensure that consumers can save money when they go solar, but also encourage them to combine solar with batteries. When they do that, it helps their own resiliency, their home resiliency if the grid goes out. But it also is a really important thing that most people don't think about, which is that it allows the consumer to provide stored clean power back to the grid when that grid needs it most, because all those little systems on all those little homes can be aggregated and actually become a virtual power plant. So there's lots of opportunities there that I think are really exciting, but we have to get those challenges addressed in order to encourage more consumers to adopt the technology. Another thing that we do all the time is work on incentives, right? So at the federal level, we have this incredible bill that just passed last year, the Inflation Reduction Act, that has really critical consumer incentives that encourage customers to adopt the technology because they get a tax credit for it. And actually, the solar tax credit, just as one example, is 30% of the cost of the system. So it's a substantial reduction in terms of the upfront cost of the system. Another challenge on the residential side is consumers, once they get educated about it, and by the way, we still have a long way to go in terms of educating consumers, but once they get educated about the incentives and about the bill savings, the next thing they think is, I can't afford that. I don't have enough cash in my bank account to pay for that. And they're right. Most consumers don't have like $35,000 or $25,000 to spend. The good news is that there's great financial products available that help consumers access the technology. There's loans and leases that are reasonably priced. And if you go solar with a lease, you actually don't have to pay any money upfront, and you can start getting the bill savings right away. So it's accessible to all kinds of customers, and those tax credits are available to lease products as well. It's just that it's a third-party owner of the system versus the consumer owning the system. So basically, if you own a system, you can get an individual tax credit, or if you go through a lease, it's a business that owns the system that gets you the bill savings benefits, and the business takes the tax credit and can offer that value in the form of a lower cost lease. So in all circumstances, those tax credits work, and it helps consumers realize that you don't have to have this huge outlay of money to start receiving the benefits. So that's another thing that we work on a lot in terms of challenges, is just making sure that more consumers know about how to access the technology, and again, making sure we have all those important public policies in place. On the utility scale side, a lot of the challenges are actually related to transmission and permitting. They also need those core tax credits. In fact, those same ones that I just explained, they apply to utility scale projects as well. Also, they apply to projects on commercial and industrial applications or community solar. So they're across the board. But yeah, I would say that on the utility scale, what I hear from my colleagues, and also having done that type of development myself in my career, getting projects permitted and getting them interconnected to the grid so they can actually serve consumers are the two biggest challenges. Those two challenges we're hoping, one of them on the permitting side in particular, we're hoping can be addressed through some permitting legislation that's being considered in Congress, energy permitting legislation. But those would be a couple of examples. And then the last thing I would say, and this again is across the board, is permitting. We do have permitting challenges at the residential level. There's this great online instant permitting tool called Solar App. It makes it super easy for jurisdictions to say, yes, it's okay to have solar on your home, but we need a lot more to start adopting this critical tool. And then with interconnection, we deal with that. Our utility scale colleagues deal with that. Getting utilities to improve their interconnection policies, make it easier for the systems to literally just interconnect to the distribution system or the transmission system is still a big barrier that we're working to address.
Do you ever find a challenge when it comes to finding land space for solar?
Yes. I mean, a lot of, on the utility scale side, absolutely, that's a challenge. When you're doing utility scale development, if it's on private land, it's very valuable for the landowner. There's really great lease agreements, land lease agreements, and they can be very competitive. Yes, there's some land challenges, but typically it's a mutually beneficial agreement and very economically beneficial for the community. I would say that the bigger challenge really is more about getting the projects permitted versus the land itself.
Moving off of this, what would you like the public to know based on public perception?
Most important thing I want the public to know is that they can access solar today. Don't wait. You don't have to have a lot of money to do it, and you can save money on your electricity bills at the same time. And it's meaningful savings. The average savings that we experience with consumers across the country is more than $200 a month.
And here's already my last question, and you've already touched on this in so many different ways, but what would you like policymakers and decision makers to know?
The first thing I would say is that solar is nonpartisan. I cannot tell you how many consumers we have that are Republicans and that are Democrats and that live in places like Texas and Florida and Colorado and California and New York and everything in between. We are seeing systems being installed, whether it's residential or larger projects, but certainly on the residential level in every single state or federal congressional district in the country. And there will be more of it. So it's important for your constituents. And that's why we'd love for your help to make sure we have the right core state and federal, and where we need it, local policies in place so that we can have a much more resilient energy system that benefits consumers at the same time.
Yes, resiliency is so important. And I think another thing that the public should know, like you're saying, is that energy infrastructure should not be politicized at all. There should not be one side or the other, because we should all be working toward the same solution. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight and, well, your entire perspective. I find this to be such an important time right now, especially to be thinking about our energy infrastructure, the grid, all those things, and realizing that honestly, our daily lives are far more fragile than we think. That's why infrastructure is so important. We don't really care until something goes wrong. We don't have a sense of urgency. And I find that, especially with solar, what is your thought on achieving net zero by 2030?
Totally achievable. There's nothing stopping us. It's just about especially now that we have some, again, really core policies in place through the Inflation Reduction Act. It's really about how can we ensure that businesses and American consumers capture all those benefits and deploy the technology. It's about accelerating deployment more than anything else.
Thank you so much for adding to the conversation, Suzanne. To learn more, you can visit aii.org/energy month, and you can check out the description to find SunPower's website.